On Remember When, this Sunday night, the spotlight falls on our first guest this week, and it's good to say that we have a friend on the other end of the phone, and that's Peter Couchman. Good evening, Peter.
Bruce?
Our compliments of the season to you and to Trish, Pete.
Philip?
Well, this is lovely to reminisce with you. I hope it is for you. We generally go back into people's backgrounds and histories, their first job. What was your first job, Peter?
Oh, my first job was as an actor.
Really?
It depends on whether you're talking about paid work or not. I mean, as a school kid, I worked. My father had a clothing store in the country.
Right.
He was, in those days, they were called drapers. You never hear of a draper anymore, do you?
You don't.
He was a general draper. And so I spent all of my school holidays working behind the counter, selling menswear, mainly.
Are you a country boy, are you?
Selling the odd bit of haberdashery and lingerie and so on.
Well, what country town was it, Peter?
This was in Kilcoy in Queensland.
And where were you at school up there?
I went to the Kilcoy State School.
You better tell us where Kilcoy is. We don't know.
I was quickly doing a mental flash there, thinking to myself, now, how do I describe where Kilcoy is? It's really, in those days it involved about an hour and a half's drive to Brisbane. These days, of course, the roads have all been improved, and it's only, I suppose, depending on the traffic, it would only take, about an hour and a quarter or so. No, it was a good 2 hours in those days. It was a lot longer than an hour and a half. But it's just, it's a very fertile agricultural area, just to the slight northwest of Brisbane.
Well, Peter, your jobs throughout the years has taken you to around the world, interviewing and doing current affairs programs. Your heartstrings must go back to that little country town from time to time.
It does, and I haven't been back for a long time. It's amazing how the memories that you carry with you from your primary school days, that sort of, I suppose, 0 until 14, really do stay with you, don't they? Because I suppose most of the strongest impressions of life are made then, aren't they?
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Do you have any brothers and sisters, Peter?
Younger sister.
Right.
They reckon before the turn of the century, that green belt between Noosa on the Sunshine Coast and Coolangatta on the Gold Coast will be one sprawling suburb, Peter, with Brisbane in the middle.
It's hard to believe. Well, see, already hobby farmers from Brisbane are starting to come out into the Kilcoy district and break up some of the land holdings, and the whole character of the place has changed so quickly.
Peter, how did the media enter your life? Current affairs, news, etc.?
When did that come in?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting actually, because in a sense, I think I was always interested in it. I was as a kid, I was mad about radio. I can remember going to the Brisbane exhibition, and that was sort of the annual trip to Brisbane in those days, because it really was quite a big deal to get to Brisbane, because the roads weren't good. And I can remember going to the exhibition and spending most of my time sitting in front of the glass window of the ABC studio, because the ABC in those days did a lot of broadcasting live from the exhibition, and things like the Children's Hour and even the Country Hour I sat through. And
yeah, it was the same down here at the Royal Agricultural Show.
Exactly. So I was mad about radio, and of course in those days you never thought beyond being a radio announcer, because I didn't know that there were any other jobs in radio. I did a couple of radio auditions when I was really still a kid, and they must have laughed when they heard them, because I would have had Buckley's chance ever of being accepted. I hope they were never kept on tape.
Well, no, we won't blackmail you with them tonight, Peter. But just back to your acting for a moment. What was your first professional acting job, and where?
Oh, well, you see, I had to go away to boarding school because there was no secondary school in Kilcoy. And so I went to boarding school in Brisbane. And in my final year at boarding school, they advertised auditions for NIDA, which was opening up the next year. So I did an audition in Her Majesty's Theatre in Brisbane and got accepted. And I didn't realise at the time how extraordinarily lucky I was, because apart from Robin Nevin, who was also in my year, Robin was the youngest, and I was the second youngest. Robin Nevin was only 16 when she started at NIDA. I was, I think I just had my 18th birthday. And so I did the 2 years at NIDA, and at the end of the 2-year course, we did our graduation productions and so on, and producers and various other people who were interested in new talent came along, and they offered, I suppose about half of us, contracts to various things. I mean, 1 or 2 got offered contracts at the Melbourne Theatre Company, 1 or 2 got offered contracts to Sydney Theatre Companies, and I was offered a contract to tour with a group of 7 actors that was called The Young of the Beaten players. We were paid by the Elizabethan Theatre Trust, and we went around schools doing abridged versions of Shakespeare.
So let's go back to, or forward, if you like, into the media.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? Was that after your theatrical experience that you wanted to pursue radio?
Yes, it was. It's interesting because I was tidying up some things the other day. Well, we're going to move house in about 6 months' time, so we've started this massive business of tidying up papers and just throwing things out. And I came across a letter that my mother had kept. I'd written it home to her, telling her that I was going to go and work in the ABC, that there really weren't any jobs there, but there was a job going in the dispatch department. And this was at the end of one of my Young Elizabethan tours, and I said, I can take the job in the dispatch department and it'll see me through Christmas, and I'll resign when something else comes up. And of course nothing else came up, because once I got into the ABC dispatch department, I got a good look at the whole of the ABC, and I realised that there were all kinds of interesting things going on. And from there I decided to apply for a cadetship in what was then called the Talks department, and I managed to get that, and that of course started me on the road to radio journalism, and from there of course into television.
So at what point did you leave Brisbane to hit the big smoke, Peter?
Well, that was when I went to NIDA. It was a pretty big experience, because I think probably all of us were a lot more. I think 18-year-olds when we were 18 were younger and more naive. I'm sure I was a lot more naive.
Absolutely.
So I was really very much a fresh-faced schoolboy going down to Sydney to start in this drama course for 2 years. So that was my big break from, I suppose going to boarding school was my big break from home, but it was certainly the big break to Sydney. And really, I didn't know it at the time, but that was really severing my links with Queensland, because I've spent, apart from going back to visit parents and so on, I've spent very little time back there since.
Well, you were with the national broadcaster, the ABC, for over 30 years. I wonder if you'd have gone to a commercial network, either radio or television, whether in fact that lifespan would have been as good, because you seem to have been cut out for the ABC and its programs over these years, Peter.
Yes, I suppose because the ABC's had much more. The ABC has had a greater variety of programs, and the ABC doesn't have the catastrophic changes of management and management policy that you get in the commercial stations, does it? I mean, God, Bruce, remember how every time the manager changed out of Channel O, which then became Channel 10, there was a new policy on the station, and people who'd been right under one policy were no longer right under the next policy.
Absolutely. I mean, I could be reading news with Annette Allison going for an hour on one Monday and doing it with you from the Age news desk the next week.
And of course, Peter, too, I don't think the ABC panic so much if ratings slip a bit. They don't panic as much as the commercials do.
No, I mean, they do programs because they believe that nobody else is going to do them, and they've got a responsibility to do them, and they say, well, we'll do this program for 6 months or for 1 year, or we'll do it for a year and see how it goes. But in the main, I mean, the ABC no longer is totally disinterested in ratings, as you know, but they don't feel that same commitment to be driven by ratings, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why there's been a greater variety of programs and fewer dramatic management changes of policy.
Peter, I said to Bruce earlier before you came on air, it seems to me you're drawn to Singapore like a magnet, or does it just appear so?
Oh, no, I love Asia. I don't know what it is. I've often speculated on why I feel this incredible affinity with that South Asian region. I mean, I wouldn't say the whole of Asia, because I still find Japan a great perplexity, but I just love those countries, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, all those countries around that area, through Hong Kong and so on. And I don't know why, but I just love it.
Peter, I remember our paths were crossing when I was reading news, and you were doing a show called Peter Couchman Tonight, which was purely an interview Tonight Show program, and I thought it was excellent, because at last we could see people intelligently questioned on issues of the day. They only last, these type of shows, for 6, 8, 12 months, and then off they go. Why is it that we can't have or seem to sustain an ongoing interview-type program?
I don't know, because, you know, in those days, Bruce, I started when the program started, it was to be in a 10:30 p.m. time slot, and in those days that was pretty pretty revolutionary because there was very little late night television. There'd been one or two stabs at it, and Channel O, to its credit, said, well, okay, we haven't done much good in any of the other time slots. Let's try and carve out the late night time slot. And the minute I started in it, they had people saying, well, why don't you put it on at 9:30? And they never really had the courage of their convictions, I don't think. But to me, that was the perfect time to sit down and do more relaxed interviews that you can't get away with earlier at night.
Well, as it turns out, Steve Vizard is doing it in that same time slot.
Yeah, but you see, Steve is not doing... that's right. I mean, I'm delighted to see at last the 10:30 time slot has been carved out by somebody. I thought Bert Newton would have done it a few years ago when he went into it, but it wasn't to be. But Steve Vizard's really only doing 6-minute interviews and sometimes shorter. And I really think that in a late night time slot like that, you should be able to, well, at least give someone 10 minutes if they're worth it, maybe even 15 or 20.
Exactly. I remember you doing the best Barry Humphries interview I had ever seen on television. You got right behind the man. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think I remember him coming on the show a couple of times. It's amazing how it all blurs into a sort of hazy blob after.
Well, I can remind you because I was your announcer, but it wasn't unusual for you to have a theme night where the same guest would stay on the show all night. But how did you enjoy that soiree into commercial television, Peter?
Oh, look, I really I mean, on one hand, it was mixed reactions, really, because I loved it, because I had always wanted to be able to interview people, to talk to people like that in a way where you do get enough time to try and let them say enough to be able to draw them out. But on the other hand, I mean, you would remember, Philip, there were tremendous sort of, I don't know, there were all kinds of pressures on us, and they weren't necessarily from the management. There were pressures of the general standards around the station at that time.
Yes, the grog cupboard in the prop bay area didn't help much, did it?
There was a huge problem with the grog.
Are you talking about Peter's problem or the crew?
It's true though, Peter, isn't it? When we'd go looking for certain members of the floor crew, they were every day was Christmas Day.
Well, that's right. There's that funny story that Mike McCall-Jones reminds me of from time to time of one of our floor hands who was helping. We had Audley Gillespie Jones on the program. He'd written a book called The Lawyer Who Laughs, and Audley Gillespie Jones is blind. And he was being helped up behind the set to come up on to be introduced for his interview. And he said to this floor hand, look, you just have to be a little bit careful because I'm blind. And this floor hand said, oh, don't worry, mate, I'm half pissed too.
Oh, yes, happy times.
I always remember the researcher who met a person who had killed someone in Sydney. They had been imprisoned, and the taxi driver had waylaid them and gone a detour from Tullamarine to Nunawading. And the researcher said, what happened? Why are you late? And the guest said, oh, the taxi driver took me the wrong way. And she said, oh, I bet you could have killed him. She just got out of Long Bay from doing a stretch for murdering someone.
Well, Peter, the reason that I enjoy doing the show was I got a free lunch every day, chicken and champagne.
Those terrible chicken sandwiches.
Yeah.
It's been really lovely talking to you at this festive time. I wish you, from Phil's point of view, a very merry, peaceful time and a lovely holiday break, and hope to see you in the new year.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
Oh, yes, I echo that. Good luck in anything you choose to do in the future, Peter.
Thank you, Philip. Been a pleasure talking to you.
Peter Couchman, a very special guest on Remember When.